Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. It's 57 degrees Fahrenheit here in Everett, Washington, and we're expecting rain, so I hope wherever you are, you're dry and warm. For those who don't already know, I'm Mike O'Gorman. I make videos where I talk about my story growing up in a household riddled with addiction and abuse. Something incredibly personal and, unfortunately, something many can relate to. But before I continue, it's crucial to understand my story and where I'm coming from and why I'm making these videos in the first place. I've lived in Washington now for 13 and a half years, but I was born and raised in Fountain Valley, California, which is a small city in Orange County. From the age of 9 until 24, I was subjected to physical and mental abuse by my father, stepmother, and even my grandfather to an extent. I grew up in a completely dysfunctional household, but I was eventually able to escape. There's a lot to unpack here, so I want to take things one step at a time as to not overwhelm yourself or myself. But for the longest time, I believed the lie that I was the cause of this dysfunction. Because anytime I confronted it, I was met with hostility and typically told that I was just trying to create problems or stir the pot. I believed that I was really the problem and that I was failing. That somehow I created and deserved the dysfunction around me. But that's the insidious nature of such environments. They distort reality. In reality, my father, stepmother, and grandfather were all drug addicts, addicted to a wide range of substances, and they did everything in their power to hide that fact. It took me years, but I eventually realized that I was not the problem, that I was caught in the middle of a vicious cycle that was not created by me or exacerbated by me. I was an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire, but most importantly, I learned to identify the red flags of the cycle and methods of combating them. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about some of these red flags and how they relate to my story. Not just to tell my story, but to arm you with knowledge to help you spot these indicators in your own life and to give you the tools to combat them. These are the signs I saw but didn't understand for years. I was wrapped up in the day-to-day survival within a home ruled by drug abuse and unchecked aggression. It's important that we know these, not just to reflect on my past, but to help you recognize them in any environment you might find yourself in. Whether it's for you or someone else you care about, understanding these signs is the first step in transforming victimhood into empowerment. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so red flag number one is the invisible rule. Sorry about the lighting behind me. But growing up, there was a mandate that what happens in this house stays in this house. Um, that was less of a rule or a saying. It was more like an impenetrable wall within the walls of our house. Um, Basically, there was a lot of craziness going inside my house at the time, and we couldn't talk about any of that. Dad and my stepmom, they typically didn't wake up until later on in the morning or maybe early afternoon. It was usually about 11 o'clock my dad would actually get up. So there were things like that going on. And it was because of drug abuse. They would stay up all night doing drugs. They would go to bed late, if they even went to bed at all. And they wouldn't wake up in the morning. I had told my grandmother about this because I stayed with my grandmother one night. And she made me breakfast. And I said, wow, I never get breakfast because dad never wakes up in the morning and I take myself to school and all these things. And so she was very upset by that. And when my dad came to pick me up, he was really angry and it started a huge fight between them. And I had to kind of defend myself to my dad as to why I said that. And I said it because it was the truth. And my dad told me it doesn't matter. Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. So that is a huge red flag. My dad didn't want anyone to know what was actually going on outside of the house, not even my grandmother, his mother. So that was pretty strange, especially, after basically hearing the fight and hearing that I was wrong, I was making stuff up, I was lying, and then my dad basically admitting in the car by saying, like, whatever happens in the house stays in the house. And this was the same with teachers as well. I couldn't tell my teachers what was going on. Uh, I had trouble doing homework, and I straight up told teachers that, well, I don't get help at home with my homework. And this caused, another big debacle. And again, asked by my dad, why did I say those things? And I said, because it's the truth. It didn't matter if it was the truth. Whatever happens in the house stays in the house. So that's red flag number one. And identifying this can be seen by, if you're trying to talk about little bits and pieces of your family life to other people, and your family has to spring into action and act like they're doing damage control, there's something going wrong there. At least from my perception, what I experienced, there was definitely something going wrong there. And it was a huge red flag that I couldn't tell anybody. And it took me a very long time to realize this, but when I did, and you could see the pieces, like my dad doesn't wake up until 11 or 12, uh, you know, during the late morning or early afternoon. Uh, he does drugs. He's not there at night. He doesn't help with homework. He drinks. All of that stuff. That's a big red flag. And it's meant to control you and to strip you of your autonomy, basically. You can't really express yourself or articulate what you're going through at home, which would be a very normal experience for people. Uh, and if you do, you get attacked, basically. So that's a huge red flag, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself or ranting. It's really meant to kind of put a disguise on what's actually going on and hide the inner turmoil. Um, a lot of people would look at my family and think we were just a normal family. We had money, my dad worked, Christmases were always amazing. We always had expensive cars in the parking lot. Sorry, in the driveway. Uh, so it was really hard to explain to people what was actually going on in the house when they just saw the exterior and they saw, "Oh, it looks fine to me." That's kind of their take on it. So that was a big issue, and it really, it's meant to just hurt you. Um, you can't talk about the things. Um, that's the way I had seen it. So that's red flag number one. So make sure that you're looking out for that. Okay, so red flag number two is absolute authority and control. So in my house, my father's words, they weren't just final, they were the ultimate decree, and they eclipsed all other voices of authority. It didn't matter who said otherwise, his commands were meant to be followed without question, even if it meant defying a higher moral societal standard. This was pretty much made very painfully clear to me when my father had told me, even if somebody like Jesus Christ, even if Jesus Christ had come down from the heavens to intervene and tell me, no, what your dad just said or had told you was wrong, don't do it. I was told there'd be no contest. My father's directions were absolute. So, this imposition of control is a clear red flag of an abusive environment. It's designed to strip you of your autonomy, once again, and to cement the abuser's power. In this case, my father and my stepmother and my grandmother. And it's to ensure that you remain under their thumb. It's a mechanism that fosters dependency and fear. It makes you dependent on them. And it makes you afraid to ever go against them because they have power over you. This makes it incredibly difficult to break free from this crazy cycle. And for me, this was more than just a theoretical understanding. It's part of my history that I've had to come to terms with. And while I'll never fully understand my father's motives, or my stepmother or grandfather's motives, especially because they're all gone. My father died of a fentanyl overdose last year with my brother. They shared an apartment together, and they died. So that closed any doors on any definitive answers. Yet, his loss doesn't erase the impact of his actions or the lessons learned from them. Understanding this red flag of absolute authority can be crucial in recognizing and challenging abusive dynamics before they claim the well being or even the lives of those caught within. So, that all being said, you should definitely look out for when your family or your friends are telling you to not say anything outside of a certain circle. In the case of family, it was to hide what was actually going on and to paint the facade on the outside that everything was fine. And nothing was fine. And like I said, people would look at our house and say, "Oh, everything there looks fine." But it was terribly toxic. And this could be something that happens with friends as well. I just recently found out from a friend that somebody lied to them about doing drugs for pretty much their entire friendship. And I kind of spilled the beans when I saw him last year when I went to go bury my father and brother. And I had said, "Oh, yeah, I remember them doing this and this and that." And they were like, "Wait, they do drugs?" "Yeah, you didn't know?" And they had no idea. So that's kind of a sign, I guess, too. Maybe I'm ranting a little bit, but anyway, let's move on to our next red flag. Okay, so red flag number three, the maze of gaslighting. So when I was a kid, reality was something that could be twisted at a moment's notice. And I was often accused of things by my family, of saying things or doing things that I hadn't, or told that events didn't actually happen the way I remembered them. And this is called gaslighting. And it's not just confusing, for you. It's actually a psychological form of manipulation aimed at making you question everything, the validity of your thoughts, your memory, and even your sanity. As a kid, I strove to adhere to my father's directives only to be met with punishment when things would go awry. Like, following his instructions would always lead to trouble at school or with friends. He always gave bad advice. It was terrible. But when he'd find out and got involved, he'd deny any involvement. He'd leave me to usually shoulder the blame of what I had said. For instance, in relation to Red Flag 2, he had once told me, "I don't care what your teacher says, she is wrong." So I repeated those words to my teacher sometime shortly after my father uttered them to me during a math lesson. And it didn't go over very well. And when asked, my father told my teacher that he would never say those things, and that I was making them up to stir the pot. And when I got home, he asked me why I would say that to my teacher, and I explained I was only parroting what he had told me earlier. He told me that my memory was wrong, that I had just made up this experience or dreamt it up, that he had never told me that don't listen to my teacher is wrong. And so this was the pattern: instructions given, instructions followed, reality denied. There was another incident that stands out, and it was the doctor's appointment debacle. And I was diligent in noting on the family calendar, as instructed, that I had a doctor's appointment on this day and at this time. And yet, when the day came, my father slept in. And later, he denied any knowledge that there was a doctor's appointment, that I had made one, that I had told him about it, that I had even wrote it on the calendar. I didn't do any of those things, despite the fact that I had walked to the calendar and pointed to it and showed everyone, there is my handwriting and there's the doctor's appointment. So it didn't matter what the truth was. In his eyes, the fault was always mine. I wasn't communicating enough, he would say. There was really no level of communication that would have sufficed, though, because the rules were always changing to suit whatever narrative was helping him, basically, to keep up the impression that he wanted to. So, to anyone who might be finding themselves in a similar situation as this, here are some things to watch out for. You're constantly second guessing yourself or your recollection of events. If you're doing that, then you might be gaslighted by somebody. You feel perpetually confused about the instructions or conversations that you have. Somebody usually gives you an instruction and you do it, and then they say, "I didn't tell you to do that," or "You didn't do the other thing that I told you to do." And so when you're constantly given instructions, you're always confused, like, okay, so what is it that you want me to do? Or even in conversations, it could be the same thing. So that's a part of it. Or you're always shouldering the blame for things you believe you didn't do. In the case of, like, my dad, like, oh, I lied to my teacher and made up these things. And I didn't lie, but I had to shoulder that because that was the narrative. So these could all be indicators of gaslighting. I guess it really depends on your situation, but they're pretty big red flags. And it's crucial for you to trust in your truth and seek support from others who affirm your reality, rather than undermining it. So look for those people who will affirm what's actually going on in your life. That's red flag number 3. All right, we're just steaming along here to red flag number 4, The DARVO distortion, a cloak of victimhood. This red flag manifested not only with my father, but sometimes with my grandfather as well, and of course my stepmother, I should say, which really further complicated things, especially with grandpa in the mix. In any confrontation, they would employ this disturbing switch. If I ever brought up their hurtful behavior or questioned their unreasonable demands, they'd immediately assume a posture of injury. They'd say things like, "What about my feelings?" or "I can't believe you're doing this to me." As if I were the aggressor causing them harm. A favorite of theirs, of mine actually, this happened a lot, especially with grandpa. It's laden with guilt-inducing drama. Um, I laugh because I realize it now and just how ridiculous it was. But it would be my grandfather saying something like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, you're giving me a heart attack. I can't believe you would do this to me." And you'd have to go over and sit down by his bed and go, "Oh, oh, where's my oxygen? Oh, you're going to give me a heart attack, Michael." And all I'm trying to do is, like, I'm just trying to seek accountability. Uh, like, that's not unreasonable, but, like, it was switched around as if, like, me trying to seek accountability was, like, life threatening. Like, I was gonna kill my grandfather if, I asked him to do the right thing. So, this is called DARVO. And if you haven't heard it already, basically it's an acronym for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender role. So it's a disorienting psychological strategy, and it's wielded by abusers to deflect blame. Uh, Widely used. It begins with denying. So they'll refuse to acknowledge their actions despite their clear evidence against what they're doing. Uh, and then comes the attack. They confront the accuser, maybe being you, with just real intensity and aiming to unnerve you and kind of put you down. Finally, they'll reverse everything. They'll kind of retell the story, the accusation themselves as if they're the sufferer, and paint you, the actual accuser, the one who's seeking accountability, as the actual culprit. They're going to paint the victim as the culprit. This method is also a deliberate act to create doubt and turmoil. It's designed to mute the true victim and burden them with guilt and the insidious suspicion that they might actually be the one at fault here. It takes gaslighting to a sinister level, where the abuser concocted stories, and those stories take precedence over reality, and the real victim's truth is effaced and doubted. So to recognize DARVO is to begin to neutralize it, really. If you're constantly finding yourself in a position of apologizing, second guessing your own perception of conflict, or shouldering guilt that shouldn't be yours to bear, it's crucial to scrutinize the relationship where that is happening. Acknowledging that the issue lies not within you, but within the web of manipulation that you're caught in, that's the first step to reclaiming your reality and your autonomy. All right, we got down to the barrel here. We're at red flag number 5, the campaign of doubt. The wound inflicted by this red flag cut the deepest for me. It was a betrayal of what family should embody. Instead of nurturing and encouragement, I was subjected to a relentless campaign designed to erode my confidence and sabotage my growth. It wasn't mere criticism or sporadic disencouragement. It was a concerted effort to anchor me in a place of subservience and dependency. Looking back, I could see a pattern that many of my family members who broke away from the turmoil also recognize. It was all about control. Uh, they wanted to keep me, they being my dad and my grandfather, within reach and as like an ever-present resource to be tapped into at their convenience. Um, this was an assault on my autonomy. And it came in many forms. Obviously it became manifested through these little seeds of subtle doubt that we saw through the previous four flags. But really, it escalated dramatically when I expressed my desire to pursue higher education and independence. I wanted to go to college and get an apartment for myself. And I still recall that confrontation with my grandfather about my future, my post high school future. And his expectation was that I fall in line and become a part of the family business, which he had going on with my father, and basically abandon any aspirations I had outside their domain. My objectives were met with derision, and my ambitions were ridiculed. When I dared to stand firm, armed with information and support from friends and teachers from the outside world, the attacks became more and more personal and more insidious. They labeled my outside influences as dangerous and misguided and even maybe life threatening. But when that failed to deter me, they played their cruelest card against me by questioning my mental capacity. I'm sorry if I'm getting choked up. It's just this talking about this it really still hurts to this day. But I was told that there was something wrong with my mind. The words mental retardation were used and weaponized against me. And I heard it many, many, many times after this, which was really meant to shatter my resolve. And it really kind of did. It really hurt me. And for anybody else facing this kind of psychological warfare, which is what it is, psychological warfare, know that it's a calculated tactic to make you question your worth and sanity. So here are some ways to recognize this and combat it. So seek external validation. We've talked about this before. Seek out some objective opinions from the outside world. Teachers, friends, individuals that can provide you a reality check, like a counselor, even. Number two would be educate yourself. Knowledge is power. Understanding that this behavior is a form of emotional abuse can help you detach yourself from your personal worth. Number three would be affirmations. So practice self-affirmations. Remind yourself of your achievements. So if you have to look into the mirror and tell yourself that you're worthy of living, you're worthy of doing these things, you can do more. These things that you have done in the past, look at them, they're great. Maybe even write them down. Definitely speak them out loud. Like I said, look into the mirror while you're doing them. Just reinforce the truth about who you are and what you're capable of. So number four is boundaries. You need to set firm boundaries with those who degrade you and treat you in any way, like we've talked about. It's okay to walk away from others and those type of conversations, or even relationships that are harmful to your mental health or your mental well-being, even if it's your family. Number five would be professional support. As I said before, maybe reach out to a counselor. So consider seeking help from a therapist or a counselor who can provide strategies to cope and eventually overcome the impacts of this craziness, this abuse. And number 6 would be community support. Engage with support groups outside of a counselor that may be active in your area, either in person or online. I myself do therapy online, so I get to see my therapist, on my computer. It's great. I don't have to go anywhere. So, connecting with others who have had similar experiences can help validate your feelings and help you realize that you're not alone. And that's one of the that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, to help you realize this. Just remember, the problem is not your capabilities or your mental state; it's their need to suppress and control you. Reclaiming yourself and your self belief is a crucial step towards independence and well being. All right, everyone. So, thank you for joining me tonight. This is my first time doing something like this, so I'm very nervous and I'm having a hard time looking at the camera and fidgeting. So, thank you for your patience and your grace on this. Um, if you know anybody who might need to hear this, you can go ahead and share this video. If you want to share any comments about what you've experienced in life, go ahead and post them in the comment section. I think engagement really is something that we can all benefit from, sharing all of our stories. So you can also follow me on Twitter. I'll have that in my description. I will also post some resources in the description as well that may help you along the way. Some counseling online or something like that as well. So just keep that in mind, that there is somebody out there for you. Let's keep this dialogue going. Stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to, as I said, dive into each of these red flags and give you a little more reinforcement. Until then, please take care of yourselves. Stay